Batman has had nearly a century of heart-pounding, exhilarating stories with thematic clashes and emotional slogs, but a story that often goes under the radar, one that shows off Batman at his most exposed and survivalist points, is the 2021 three-part Black Label miniseries Batman One Dark Knight. One Dark Knight was originally published in December of 2021 and was written and illustrated by Mark Simpson under his pen name Jock. He also illustrated Black Mirror and The Batman Who Laughs, and it presents itself as a straightforward, no-nonsense story about Batman helping the GCPD to transport a high-level metahuman, EMP, across Gotham to Blackgate Penitentiary. Obviously this doesn't go to plan, and EMP gets out, plunges the city into darkness, and that leaves Batman to get EMP to Blackgate, which is on the other side of the city, on foot with various gangs finding out about this and hunting the Dark Knight and his now dead-weight passenger down. It's a simple story, and today we're going to dive into all it has to offer, because surprisingly, it has quite a lot to offer. Off the bat, pun intended, a spoiler-free look at the story. First off, this is a standalone story, meaning it isn't connected to any other part of the Batman mythos except itself. And whereas some may not like this, preferring every story to be connected to something, I think this helps amplify this story for one reason. It doesn't need to be any more than we're given, and what it presents is nothing short of a really fun read. The way the story is written means that the exposition is kept to a minimum, and given how simple the story really is, adding extra cogs into this machine would have seemed a tad unnecessary. Jock writes in a way which means from page 1 you are locked in. There's very little room to come up for breath, with something happening in every page and every panel, to the point where even despite this story including 44, 45 and 44 pages a book, more than your average comic, it never feels like that, and I never once thought, oh my god, this is going on for way too long. This is down to the pacing, which is perfectly done for a story of this stature. It's a self-contained, really fun little read which does not take long to get through at all. I think One Dark Knight hits all the beats a Batman fan would expect. It has the struggle, it has the physical and emotional battles from all sides, the typical dry humour from Batman and Alfred, a dynamic which is one of my favourites in this story, and of course as many cool moments as it needs to cement itself as one of Batman's more badass stories. But that doesn't mean it loses its emotional edge, because it has a lot of emotion in it, especially as it reaches the climax. Above all else though, one of the most important parts of the book is its art, and wow, this story has some of the most beautiful art I've seen in a Batman story. One thing I love about it is the contrast between Batman and the world around him. Jock draws Gotham and the other characters as fairly grounded and realistic, but Batman is almost this larger-than-life figure in the middle of it all, and thankfully I wasn't the only person to make this observation. In a 2021 interview with Alex Jaff, Jock spoke about the book and had this to say about the art and how the contrast between the world and Batman came to be. He can be a guy in a suit, he can be a superhero, he can be the detective, he can be a silent detective, he can be almost like an ethereal, scary kind of demon of the night, he can be so many things. And I think the strength of him is that he can carry that stuff to start with. He can be slightly larger than life. And this thought process is really visible. There's some panels later on which paint Batman as a kind of pillar of truth and justice, and it just works. And without sounding too much like Todd Howard, if I had to give a very simple, no-frills review of this story as a whole, it would be just that. It just works. I adore the art in this book, specifically the splash pages. If we look at page 35 of issue 2, I mean, god, look at this. It tells the story of the comic, but also does it in a very tasteful way. You can see the map of Gotham, a reoccurring visual in this story, with Batman towering over it, reinforcing that larger-than-life moniker. But around him, he's fighting off gangs and really struggling to survive the night, a direct contrast to that very moniker. There's also page 28 of issue 1, which gives me serious Dark Knight Returns vibes, with the symbol covering the building in the background, and Batman chasing after EMP across the rooftops of Gotham. It's a great visual and one of my favourites in the story. Earlier I mentioned the recurring map visuals throughout the story, and these show where the different gangs hunting Batman down are, and where Batman and EMP are, and it's such a fun way of showing their progress, and it's one of the main reasons I like this story. It's unique, but much like the rest of the book, also incredibly well done and simple. Putting the art aside though, Jock writes all of the characters really well, especially obviously the main cast. EMP is an engaging enough character with some beautiful emotional moments, and Batman, Gordon, and Alfred are all written well, with Vasquez being the main antagonist of the story. And she is written really well. Like, you really begin to hate her. Like, she is vicious. EMP's son, Brody, is also a sympathetic character who you just want to see win and live happily. The beauty of this story is its simplicity, and I know not everyone will like it, but I think it's great. It also features a fun little cameo from one of Batman's more iconic villains in one of the more brutal action scenes we play out, which is one of the book's many fight scenes which are beautifully drawn and walk the line between gritty violence and that comic book over-the-top style. But from here on out, we'll be discussing the story in full, going through the plot, making any observations we need to, so if you don't want any spoilers, click off now, go and read it for yourself, and come back later. I promise you will not regret it. Anyway, let's get in to the meat of the video. One dark night begins with a heatwave sweeping over Gotham, with Batman and Alfred discussing a prison transfer from Arkham Asylum, and they both recognise that petty crime rates are rising because of the rising tension due to the heatwave levels. We find out the prisoner being transported is called EMP, and the high amount of energy in the air today is dangerous and might affect the transport. They need to move pretty quickly, and that is the setup right there. That's the entire premise of the story. It's a simple task. Get a prisoner from one side of Gotham to the other in conditions which don't exactly favour the good guys here. We find out a gang called the Z-Boys are hunting EMP down, and they're following the Batplane across Gotham, knowing Batman will be keeping his eye on the convoy carrying EMP. The convoy moves out and Batman tells Alfred to keep an eye on EMP's vital signs. And we also find out they're holding EMP in a Faraday truck, a truck designed with a cell on the back which blocks all electrical signals going in or out, essentially keeping the prisoner's powers at bay. Batman notes there's also 6.5 miles to the other side of Gotham, and the convoy rolls out on its way from Arkham to Blackgate. We get this awesome map of Gotham, which for a big fat Batman nerd like myself is so cool. It's punctuated by these little police reports coming in from all over the city. Like we found out earlier, obviously, petty crime rates are high today, and one of Gotham's most dangerous prisoners is soon to be in the middle of it all. And seeing all these little police reports with the crime rates going up is just a really nice touch. We cut to some engineers at Blackgate readying his containment cell, and they fire it up, noting how the convoy is about an hour away, which considering they're 6 miles away means they're moving really slowly, to say the least. Anyway, Alfred also asks Bruce if there's a possibility he can go upstairs to have some gin, which is the first sign of Alfred being the secret weapon of this book. See, while Alfred doesn't appear a huge amount, I found myself really excited when he popped up. He's genuinely really funny in this story, and that humour kind of carries over to Batman, because as we all know, he's hilarious too. Later in the story, there's a page where Batman finds the Batplane crash-landed after EMP escapes and lets off a giant electrical blast, which essentially plunges Gotham into darkness. And with the Batplane being set to autopilot at the time of the blast, it ends up crashing. When Batman stumbles across the wreckage and opens the cockpit to get supplies for his belt, he finds a guy in there who tries to tase him. But Batman just boots him out of the cockpit and calls him an idiot for trying to use a taser after an EMP blast just disabled all electronics in the city. It genuinely made me laugh out loud. It's a simple little moment, but one I found myself genuinely laughing at. Like, not only did this guy think he was going to take Batman out with a taser, he does it after an EMP blast, and, well, he pays for it. It's the perfect blend of Batman's dry humour and serious nature. But anyway, back to the story. We then meet Renee Montoya and Rita Vasquez. We learn that Vasquez doesn't quite see eye to eye with Jim Gordon, but publicly he has to say otherwise. This creates some tension between the two characters, with Montoya caught in the middle. Montoya even makes a reference to Gordon having friends in high places, as we cut to Batman discussing the amount of activity on the ground. But Alfred says it's nothing the GCPD can't handle, and he might trade the martini and gin for a hot chocolate. But Batman says he'll pass on a hot drink on a night like tonight. We cut to the GCPD conference that Gordon is speaking at, and he introduces Vasquez to the onlooking crowd, as she's told the convoy carrying EMP is on the move, but she says they're quote-unquote late. Through Gordon's pauses, we can infer that he doesn't quite believe what he's saying here, telling the crowd Vasquez has some new initiatives to stamp out crime. She goes on to mention the convoy transporting EMP, whose real name is Edward M. Pressler. Get it? EMP... Edward M. Pressler, but also EMP because he's electric anyway. to a secure facility in Blackgate Prison. She then alludes to the last time Edward escaped as some sort of memorable event, something which will become painfully useful later. Back in Gotham, and the gang following Batman know they're closing in on Edward's location, and just like that, they fire a rocket at the truck as Vasquez finishes her speech up. The criminals attack the truck once more as Vasquez is alerted to the convoy being hit. Gordon follows her and they argue about the necessity of the transfer, with Vasquez finishing off by doing some not so subtle foreshadowing by saying it's only in the dark that people show their true colours, which is interesting to say the least. Edward begins making a break for it, with Batman chasing after him wielding a portable Faraday device. He gives chase to Edward as Vasquez tells Gordon she's going to clean up the mess. Gangs across Gotham are alerted to EMP being free, which sends them into a frenzy, and we cut to a boy sitting in his bedroom. Spoiler alert, but this is actually EMP's child, Brody. Anyway, Batman continues giving chase, and it's here we discover that if Edward's out in the wild too long around all this electricity, he'll become a ticking time bomb and could cause catastrophic damage. Not as much damage as Gordon causes to Vasquez, as he mentions that he knows this whole thing is personal for her, given what happened to her family. Now, nothing is said directly, but we can assume this is linked to the event with the MP that happened 5 years ago. Edward leads Batman to the Neon, the brightest point in Gotham. He takes a few hits of the sweet electrical current, and just like that, boom. Gotham is submerged into a blackout, and with gangs converging on Batman and Edward's position, Batman only has a few hours to get Edward over to Blackgate on his back. If he's out in daylight, well, I'm sure we don't need to spell out the consequences for that cocktail, but Gordon and Vasquez and Montoya end up in a 3-car pileup, with the EMP blackout shutting the cars off, and we cut back to the boy in the bedroom from earlier, Brody, as he discovers it is indeed a city-wide blackout. Batman notes how the portable Faraday device will keep EMP safe for now, but he's going to have to move now or risk Edward being outside in the daylight. He has 4.6 miles left to go and 8 hours until dawn, and we get this awesome page which shows us the map of Gotham and the gang's positions, all converging on Batman's position right through to Blackgate. One way or another, he's going to have to get through some gangs to get Edward to safety, and that brings issue 1 to an end. Anyway, from here the story is set, and issue 2 opens with Batman with Edward on his back, carrying him through Gotham. Gangs such as the Maronis, the Z-Boys, and EMP's own gang, the Tasers, are all on the hunt, leaving Batman to fight his way through them. All this while EMP tries to cling on to any electrical current he can get his hands on, including the synapses in Batman's brain, weakening him every step of the way. We then get some awesome action panels of Batman fighting his way through the gangs using every trick in his belt. Back at the car wreck caused in issue 1, we see the cops climb out of the wreck, with Montoya being left to the gangs by none other than Vasquez, who clearly has ulterior motives. She actually ends up at the house of Brody, EMP's child, and she finds he's not there anymore, much to the shock of Oscar, the man raising him. So with Vasquez also on the hunt for Brody and the entire city plunged into this blackout, we cut back to Batman and EMP having this really emotional heart-to-heart. This was the interaction that made me fall in love with this book. It shows us that Edward isn't fully responsible for his own actions and misuse of his powers, and he actually killed Brody's mother during the events that happened 5 years ago. Edward also says he can't go back into an isolation chamber because when he's in there it's like torture. He's still conscious and still able to feel everything, but he can't do anything. He's lucid for the first time tonight and he doesn't want to go back. It's a really well written moment with the situation framed as a kind of confessional for Edward to allow himself to really begin to live with his mistake. But just as he's about to tell us there was another family caught in his last accident and only one member survived, that being Vasquez, gangs open fire on the pair as Batman fights them off and they manage to just about escape. Cutting back to Brody's adventure, and we find that Oscar wants to head out and find his surrogate son, but he's taking orders from someone and isn't allowed to go and find Brody. For now, anyway, Brody is in the wind. Batman once again begins moving Edward across the city, making mental notes of which gangs are where and what they're doing, and he once again notes how much distant he has to go, 3 miles till Blackgate. He also tells us that the GCPD are out, but he doesn't know which ones they can trust, as we cut back to Vasquez, and she tells some cops to make sure they have quote-unquote friendlies in the streets, and they need gangs out there who they know will deliver, meaning that she's using some pretty pretty underhanded tactics here to get a hold of EMP. Brody is then attacked while trying to help his dad out of a sticky situation, but thankfully Batman was passing by and is able to get a batarang in the mix, which throws everyone off. But Oscar tells Brody to go home and he needs to stay out of his way, or he doesn't finish off what he's saying, but everyone has to keep moving. Batman, Brody, Oscar, Vasquez, all in the mix and all on the move, with Batman still having 1.2 miles to go until he reaches Blackgate. We see Vasquez, who's found Brody, and I love this page so much. It's actually really freaky, and it paints Vasquez as some kind of monster. Like, drawing her like some sort of hunchback creature, it's such a simple choice, and the fact we can only see her glasses on her face as she lurches towards Brody goes such a long way to paint her as this monster. A monster she foreshadowed becoming early in the pages of issue 1. She begins telling Brody he's useless and unloved, and she just belittles him all over, and eventually he snaps and explodes like his father, letting off an EMP blast, and we get this beautiful visual of the explosion. Honestly, like I said earlier, this book has so many beautiful splash pages, and if you don't find the story particularly compelling or somehow not complex enough, I still suggest reading the book for the visuals it provides, because the artwork is outstanding. The explosion grabs Batman's attention, and after confirming it didn't come from Edward, he keeps his eyes locked on Blackgate. That's the goal after all. We then get another beautiful splash page spanning across 2 pages, showing Batman's fight across the city. I kind of spoke about this as much as I could without just making stuff up in the intro, but this might be one of my favourite splash pages in Batman media. It just does so much, all while Batman's internal monologue grapples with the fact his city has lost its mind over a few key pieces falling out of place. He knows Gotham is better than this, and I just think this page does so much to further the story both visually and with what's going on in Batman's mind. We then see a few blocks regaining power, which isn't ideal, and Alfred nearly gets through to Batman. However, the big discovery here as Batman moves from downtown to the West Docks is that of the Batplane's wreckage. This is where we get the little bit I spoke about earlier, where the guy tries to use a taser, and Batman calls him an idiot. I think what made this so funny to me was the little click annotation above the taser. I don't know why, but it just caught me off guard the first time I read the story, and I actually laughed out loud like a moron. Which is good, it shows I can still get childlike wonder from Batman comics. Anyway, in the meantime, Batman and EMP are ambushed. Batman blames it on the fact his brain is still foggy and he didn't spot the telltale signs of the ambush, but alas, he's separated from Edward as the Taser gang take back their boss and are subsequently jumped by another gang, leading the Tasers to take EMP down into the sewers, and after circling around the sudden battlefield, Batman drops down into the sewers below, into the darkness, which connects the lifeblood of Gotham City. He notes it's too dark, but, well, he likes it. That's where issue 2 ends us off, and honestly, for me, issue 2 is the best of the 3 issues. It never slows down, it never stops, and if for some reason you could only read one issue of this story, whatever world that would be in, I'd highly suggest it be this one. Vasquez gets time to shine as a genuine monster who seemingly just wants revenge for her family, and the pages between Batman and Edward are so heart-wrenching, and go a long way to build Edward as a sympathetic character who doesn't deserve the life he's been flung into. I think from start to finish, this is a perfect issue. It's got some beautiful art, a compelling set of characters, and some awesome scenes where Batman gets to fight off some thugs on his mission. But as we move into the final issue here, we hit a truly great crescendo for the story. We open the third and final part of this story with Batman hunting EMP down in the sewers about an hour and a half after the last issue's ending. We get this really, what I can only describe as quintessential quote-unquote Batman monologue, as he talks about how he's heard of things that live in the sewers, in the dark, but he belongs down here in that same dark alone. He says it makes him who he is, and bam, he finds Edward tied up with his gang surrounding him, all dead on the floor. Batman thinks he might have just been some kind of offering to something, but before he can finish that thought, he's jumped and eventually the attackers just kind of stop, and in walks none other than Waylon Jones, aka Killer Croc. Croc mentions how these freaks worship him and bring him food. We then cut back to Vasquez who, still in possession of Brody, asks the cops to make sure the gangs give her a clear route through to Blackgate Bridge, using her next level charisma and corruption stats to take the boy to his father. Then we finally get to see Croc and Batman fight. Batman is actually being completely outmatched here, being smashed about and kicked in the head by Croc, who wants to obtain EMP's powers because in his words, it would make him a god. An electrical crocodile god. Okay, Waylon. Little side note here, but I can't decide whether I love or hate this Croc design. Croc is one of my favourite Batman characters, if not my outright favourite after Batman himself. But here in some panels he looks so menacing and badass, and in others he has really skinny legs and a strangely blocky top half. Just a little observation I made, but either way this little fight is an awesome visual and Croc absolutely wipes the floor with Batman here. Above ground some gang warfare is stopped dead in its tracks as the gangs decide to actually call a truce and work together to hunt down EMP. Meanwhile, down below, Croc is still kicking Batman's ass, and as a certified Croc enjoyer, this is quite fun to see. And here he looks so menacing and scary, so that's a nice bonus because you can't see his little spindly legs. But that all comes to a grinding halt when we cut back to Vasquez and Brody. Brody tries to make an escape by asking some cops for help, but well, that doesn't work. They're corrupt too, and one of the cops is executed by Vasquez, who adds him to her growing kill count. It's not going much better for Batman either, who's being ripped apart and uses a flash bat? Banger? Bat. Anyway, he blinds them using phosphorus or something and manages to escape. And Batman talks to himself saying he's broken, bleeding, and every fibre in his body is telling him to call it. But not tonight. Not any night, which is so cool. I love when Batman does this. This whole never say die attitude is one of the main reasons I love Batman as a character, and this moment just makes me smile so much. It's just cool. I don't have any words to describe this moment that aren't just it's cool. It's just so goosebump inducing, and yeah, it's awesome. He then ties his broken mask around his face, stands up, and again gives us one of the hardest Batman lines ever. He says, "For all the stench down here, Croc, all I smell is your fear." Just hell yeah. This is Batman. Batman goads Croc into running at him and uses his half a ton of weight against him, flipping him over into a wall and knocking him out cold. He asks if anyone else wants a fight and they all disperse, leaving EMP to tell Batman to help him out, and he falls unconscious again. But he wakes up and he again repents for his past actions, and Batman tells him he knows he didn't mean to hurt anyone before he begins dragging him back to Blackgate. I love how even in his weakest moment in this story, Batman still finds time to reassure Edward before he continues the mission again. This story just gets Batman. It understands him perfectly. Yes, he's badass and he's cool and he's got that dry wit, but he's also sympathetic. He knows the difference between a criminal and a victim of circumstance, and I just love that so much. We find Alfred though back in Wayne Manor with the Batcomputer back online, and he makes a shocking discovery. The Fashion District, West Side, Tri-Corner, Chinatown and City Hall have all come back online and are back up and running, leaving Batman fighting against the clock even more so than before, with only 2 blocks of darkness left around Blackgate. At 5:37, Batman drags EMP out of the sewers at Blackgate Bridge, and he tries to contact Alfred, telling him he's nearly there, but as he turns around he realises that every single person on the hunt for himself and Edward are also nearly there, and they begin lighting Batman up. Batman manages to jump away and ends up separated from Edward, but as Batman fights off the gang members, Edward is cornered by Vasquez, who has Brody. Edward doesn't want his son to see him in this state and begins freaking out. Batman continues fighting the gang members, but eventually decides to cut his losses and jumps from the side of the bridge with all the gang members on, and we cut back to Vasquez, Brody and Edward, with Vasquez insulting Edward and trying to goad Brody into killing his own dad with his powers, rendering his earlier explosion a mere test by Vasquez to see if her plan would work. She says she needs his power because that will finally put EMP in the dirt, but as Vasquez goes Brody into killing his father, the father and son reunite and hug, allowing Brody to accept his father instead of turning against him. She begins getting angry at Brody as Edward begins charging up, unable to control his powers, and Brody, furious at Vasquez, looks at her with pure rage in his eyes, ready to kill her for trying to turn him against his dad. But Batman emerges from the debris he found himself in following his jump to the other side of the bridge, followed by an RPG shot, and he puts his hand on Brody's shoulder and tells him this isn't the way. We then get this beautiful art of Batman holding Brody, telling him it's all going to be okay, and once again, One Dark Knight just understands Batman, and this is just another moment of it getting what Batman is all about. The resilience, the heart, the strength, the compassion, it's all just Batman. Vasquez begins shooting Brody, asking why he won't just die, but Batman realises he simply isn't built to handle his powers anymore, and he tells Brody he's going to go and help his father. Before Edward finally blows completely, which would kill everyone on the bridge and cause untold damage to the city, Batman manages to tackle him into the water below, saving himself with the grapnel gun and leaving himself, Brody and Vasquez standing on the bridge, Edward now down in the water, presumed dead. Vasquez says she wasn't sure that's how she planned it, but she's glad EMP is dead and it was a pleasure to see him killed. She begins leaving and Batman says she can't just leave, and here is another absolutely awesome Batman moment. He manages to bait Vasquez into spilling her guts about her plan and how she kept tabs on criminals' kids all throughout her time in Child Protective Services, knowing it would come in handy one day. She then drops herself further in it by saying she's not worried about the consequences because who will the people believe? Batman and some kid, or the head of Gotham's entire prison services? And as she finishes up, Batman asks Gordon if he got all that, and she realises she's been screwed. We get this hilarious shot of her looking like she's just seen a ghost, exposing the monster to be nothing more than a cowardly, vengeful woman, as the GCPD show up to regain control of their city, and most pertinently, Vasquez. Again, this is shown through another beautiful splash page, this one having Gordon flanked by a handful of cops waiting on the other side of the bridge, with the police force behind him arresting all of the gang members who followed Edward and Batman to the bridge. The next page shows a few helicopters circling the site where Edward fell, and they find him, managing to bring his body back up to the surface, and thankfully, he's still alive. Somehow, some way, he survived the blast, but quite tragically, they have to take him back to Blackgate, and he ends up in his containment chamber, forced to suffer more time in the never-ending limbo. The final page of the story lets us know the GCPD have rounded up all the stray gang members, and Vasquez. Brody is fitted with a restraining device and allowed to go home with Oscar, who really loves him, and Batman says that sometimes all you need is someone looking out for you, as Alfred comes back onto the comms and tells Batman that Gotham City is back online. Batman thanks him, grapples away, and the sun rises over a grateful Gotham City. Wow, that's a lot to digest. I love this ending so much. It's hopeful, but it also mixes in enough tragedy to leave a sour taste in the mouth, despite the victory. The good guys win, but with Edward still alive and being forced back into his containment chamber in Blackgate, it all just comes to this wonderful, bittersweet crescendo, which I feel like tops off this underrated and underloved story perfectly. I said it a lot, especially in the intro, but this story is fairly simple. It isn't trying to be the next Long Halloween or Hush, but by God does it understand Batman as well as either of those stories. It doesn't present Batman with some grand mystery, and as far as detective work goes, he really doesn't have to do much here. But where it lacks in the world's greatest detective aspect, it makes up for nearly everywhere else. And you know what? I love that so much. I think that's awesome. Jock stated in the interview I mentioned in the spoiler-free segment that when he took on the task of not only illustrating this book but writing it, he wanted to, quote, use a simple story that I felt like I could do very effectively rather than trying to do one that's too ambitious, trying to be too much, you know? This is a very simple story told over one night, and that's what I wanted to do, end quote. And he definitely did this, from the art to the storytelling, to the character work, to the moments between our main cast. This book is great, and I'd implore any of you new or old Batman fans to read it. It can work as a great taster for the character of Batman, that larger-than-life but still grounded world he inhabits and the people who lived within it alongside him, and for older fans, I think there's a huge amount to love here, and really not a whole lot to dislike. Some may say it doesn't do enough, but hey, like I said, not every story needs to be an extended mystery, like The Long Halloween or a psychological masterclass like Serious House. Some stories just need to do the basics right, and One Dark Knight does this better than the majority of Batman stories penned over the years. It really feels like it totally understands Batman and the multiple facets that make him Gotham's One Dark Knight. Well, that's all I've got for you today. I do hope you enjoyed the video. If you're new here, a subscription and a like would be appreciated more than you know. I'm trying to branch my content out into the world of comics and wider Batman media, because I'm not only an Arkham fan, but a lifelong Batman fan, and I want to share my love for other parts of the Dark Knight's storied history through these videos. This is still a new concept for me, this review slash recap slash retrospective look at the comics, so let me know what you think. One thing that always bugs me is when people frame comic book based videos as reviews and then just do a standard plot recap, so I hope I've added a bit more than just reminding you or telling you of the plot of this story. Again, let me know how I can improve these videos, because I know I've already got so many more lined up that I want to make, so yeah, give me feedback, like, be nice about it though. I have a very fragile ego, and if you say something mean, I will just cry into a pillow. All jokes aside though, thank you all for watching. I do hope you enjoyed. I'll see you next time, and goodbye.